Hey everyone, super excited to be here. We have an awesome group of panelists with a wealth of knowledge. We're going to be talking about building a winning engineering team. So lots of ground to cover, everything from recruiting to hiring to retention to scaling an engineering org. So I wanted to start off by introducing each of the panelists. So I'll just call on each of them, and then I just want to hear a little bit about your current job and then also favorite quarantine activity. So let's go ahead and start with Matt.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Stevie. I am engineering manager at Saya. We are one of the blockchain startups in the space. We work on kind of data storage in blockchain. Have an exciting new product called Skynet, which is a very ominous name, but a super fun and useful platform for developers. Super excited to be a part of this panel. My favorite quarantine activity has been building out my wife and I's van. We had bought a van about a year and a half ago, and we've been building that out and been able to kind of spend a little bit more time on it because we've been home. So,
love that. All right, Paris.
Hi, I'm Paris Chandler. I work on the developer success team at G2I, and I'm also founder of Black Tech Pipeline. For G2I, I vet engineers, and then for Black Tech Pipeline, I recruit Black technologists to my employer partner companies. And my favorite quarantine activity has recently changed. I'm really into this video game, or not a video game. I'm not a gamer, so I apologize, but I'm into this game called Among Us on mobile. Isn't it such a good game? Yeah, I'm into Among Us. So like, if you play, I am down to get in a room with you. So yeah.
Nice.
That is a great game, by the way.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to write that down. Jillian?
Hi, thank you so much. Yes, I'm Jillian. I'm Director of Engineering at a company called Drizzly. It's a marketplace to order alcohol online, and we guarantee it within 60 minutes. So I've been there for about 2 months. Sort of did a change during COVID times. Before that, I was at a company called Easy Cater for a couple of years and really helped that team scale from about 20 engineers to 40 in 2018 and then 40 to 80 in 2019. Previous to that, really spent a lot of time in early stage startups, sort of that first engineer building out a team. My favorite quarantine activity really has been like working on my cooking skills and my cooking game. So I have the cookbook, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, and I've been making that buttermilk chicken, which has been great. So yeah.
Oh man, now I'm hungry. Okay, thank you everyone. Let's go ahead and jump right into the first question. So we'll sort of start chronological order. It's day one of building out your engineering team. What are traits that you look for when making your first few engineering hires? And yeah, Paris, if you want to start.
Oh, okay. So for me, I'm really, really big on just culture. There's been studies where people would take less pay to work in a really positive, enthusiastic culture. So that's really big to me. So I want to work with engineers who they're like empathetic as humans, especially the leaders. Like you want to bring in leaders who are going to be empathetic to people, and you really want to cater to their needs specifically. So for each candidate that's coming in through recruitment or whatever process you're using to interview them, like find out what that candidate wants. What is their goal? You know, do they want to move up internally in the company? Into which role? You know, what are the things that are going to help them get there? And then of course there's your needs. You know, there are certain requirements for certain roles that you have. But you really want to make sure that it's a good match so that you're not only putting someone into a role because you have to fill it and you have to get someone that has to hit the ground running, but you want to make sure that you're helping them attain their goals, and that it's going to be a role where they can continue to climb the ladder within the company internally. So, you know, cater to their needs, but make it mesh with yours.
Matt, did you have something to say there?
Yeah, so definitely 100% agree with Paris in terms of, focusing on culture and something that when we were building our team this past year, coming down from the mindset in terms of like looking for culture fit, looking for culture adds. So for us, we went from, we were a 9-person team looking to kind of like double the size of the team. So we were pretty small. And so like our culture was still kind of, developing and growing. And so trying to look for like who can bring something new to us to kind of expand what we're working on. And then kind of one of the things that we had to discuss as a team in terms of what we were looking at is, we are, being a very small team and a very small early stage startup, that alone has a lot of kind of ambiguity in terms of like, there's not a lot of direction, there's a lot of self-starters, trying to, take on a lot of hats. Like, how do you quantify that? And especially, being in the blockchain space where it's a kind of new technology, like, new ecosystem, like there's just a lot of uncertainties and there's not a lot of stuff to go off. There's not a lot of kind of past success stories or like past examples to go off. And so we found a great article from Harvard Business Journal, I think, that talked about volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous situations, or kind of the acronym of VULCA. And basically that like helps kind of define, if you can find people that can do well in those VULCA situations, then they can kind of do well in, startups and do well in kind of really succeeding in kind of today's climate. And so like how you kind of translate that to traits was trying to gauge curiosity, insight, engagement, and determination. And so like as we went through our interview process, like trying to through those interviews try and gauge like, is this person showing a curiosity for the role and the company and the work? Like, is this person, as they're working through examples with us, do they show kind of like a level of engagement and determination, kind of working through things? And that really I think worked well for us and kind of gave us some really, really strong candidates that joined the team. And yeah, we were super excited.
Great. And so I will just add to that, if this is really like your first hire or like your first few hires, I definitely agree with what the other panelists said. I think something at like a very early stage, you're really looking for someone who believes in your mission, right? And so along that lines of empathy, it's like they are bought in, they get it, they believe in what you're trying to accomplish. And with that empathy, they can show that towards customers, right? Because this is someone that you need to have conversations with to solve customer problems. And so they need to be able to kind of get into that mindset of the customer. So I think early on, that's very important. I think as your team grows, like you might hire more engineers that will never be client facing or who are just like very, very technical. And I really want to dig into like the really technically hard problems. But at first you need someone who can be a bit more of a partner with you. And you may or may not have sort of that CTO or that technical lead yet. And so really you want to look for someone who is empathetic, agrees with the mission, is technically reliable. And if you're not totally sure that they are going to be the most senior technical person, you can always get them a mentor and find other ways to fill in those gaps.
Awesome. So I guess I have a follow-up for that, which is, so how do you screen for some of these specific traits that you mentioned in an interview? So like, how do you screen for empathy? How do you screen for someone who can handle volatility? How do you screen for customer centricness in an engineer?
So I think like conducting an interview, like a conversation is like the best way to go about it. Like just talk to someone. You can ask them about their technical history and their experience on the job. And I guess sort of just looking for what made them interested in applying to your organization and what are their goals, right? Again, like you really want to make sure that you are the right fit for them and the same as they're the right fit for you. I forgot where I was going with this, but yeah. Just I feel like just having a conversation, not making it very complicated, asking them about their experience, asking them where they're trying to go, what are their goals, again, making sure that their views align with yours as far as like the mission that you have and the product that you're building. And and just asking them questions revolving around maybe the role that they're applying to. Like if they're applying for an architect level position, you know, how would you go about architecting this application? Like what are their ideas? Because maybe they're going to contribute something that you didn't think of. So just asking those types of questions during the interview, it'll give you, you know, a wider perception of what they'd be like as a team member.
And so I guess I would add to that, those behavioral questions are important for screening the types of things that we just listed, right? So usually there's some type of like technical exercise and you're really digging into, can they technically perform the way that we need? But then those behavioral questions really come in, and you can get creative, but you can actually just ask them about their previous experiences, right? Like when have they gone beyond what the job called for, you know, to help out a customer or to help out a teammate or an internal person, right? And you'll find that a lot of engineers are very thoughtful, right? And so you want to find those questions that you can ask that can dig into the times that they were thoughtful in a way that will translate well into what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think for us, something that we found to be a helpful way to gauge some of those kind of weird traits that I talked about in terms of like curiosity and engagement and determination is simply kind of documenting what are the questions that the candidate is asking. And so, you know, I would always try and leave plenty of space in the interviews to, you know, kind of focus on like what are the questions that the candidate is asking and kind of going into those. And like that's, you know, a great opportunity to have those conversations that Paris kind of talked about. And you know, I think it was a kind of clear marker in terms of, you know, the candidates that we hired were the ones that jumped like right into like the hard questions around like who uses your product, you know, and like, and it's like, you know, why do you even do it this way? And kind of like, you know, really kind of those challenging questions versus, you know, some of the, you know, surface level questions that, you know, candidates often ask around, you know, oh, like, what's a day in the life like, and kind of, you know, what perks do you have, and kind of stuff that can pretty much be gleaned from, you know, the job description or the website. And so comparing what questions candidates are asking and kind of seeing where those conversations go can be really, really insightful.
Mm-hmm. On that note, does anyone have sort of like their go-to interview question? Not necessarily like a technical one, but more of like a behavior one that you always try to ask during an interview?
Something that we try and ask is, you know, I think Paris and Jillian both mentioned kind of talking about career goals. So that's a big one, like asking where do you want, like, what do you want to be doing? And, you know, looking to see if they have kind of a specific answer for that. But then also I like asking, you know, what do you like doing professionally, and like, what do you not like doing professionally? You know, like I'm not asking, you know, what are you good at and what are you bad at? It's like, I'm so bad at being perfect, you know, and like you know, and, but asking like, it's, you know, phrasing it differently in terms of, you know, like when you have a job, like what do you gravitate towards doing because you enjoy it, you know, like do you, from a technical standpoint, do you like naturally like really enjoy working on back end or front end tasks? Do you like working on kind of team processes? Like, you know, what is it that you kind of naturally gravitate towards? And I think that's something that I noticed with a lot of our interviews is, you know, people that had a good answer to that, like were also ones that were a little bit more reflective in terms of like what they wanted to do with their careers, and like had more engaging questions, and kind of just shows a level of reflection in terms of what it is that they want to do. And yeah, I like asking that question.
So one of my favorite questions to ask is, I ask them to tell me their most favorite project that they've worked on and why. And so this is a technical project, but I always tell them it doesn't have to be the most complicated project, but just their favorite project. And that actually will tell you a lot about a person. So sometimes developers will pick a project that was like really technically challenging, and they got to like dig into a new area of code. Sometimes they will pick something where they got to solve a customer problem and they saw the effects that their code had to make someone's life better. You know, there's a wide variety of reasons that an engineer chooses their favorite project, but that's been something that's really helped me kind of see like, okay, who is this person and what kind of problems do they care about?
Nice. Okay, let's talk about quote unquote culture fit. So now you have enough engineers on your team that a culture has been established. And as you hire, how do you feel about culture fit as a concept when screening and hiring? Do you think it's a constraint? Is it necessary? How does that cross the line into bias? Is this a useful concept in the first place?
I do not like culture fit. I don't like the word. I don't like the concept. I don't like it at all. I don't feel like, I think don't hire people who are a-holes and then leave it at that. You know, like everyone should be able to bring in like their own experiences, their own, you know, diversity of thought. Like just let people come in as they are. Obviously, like during the whole interview process, make sure that this person, again, like there are ways to find out if someone's empathetic or not. There are certain questions that you can ask to find out if, you know, someone's going to be someone you want to work with, right? And then I think let that be it. Obviously, like they also should have the hard and soft skills, but I don't know. For me, I'm just like very like straightforward. Are you someone I want to work with? You know, what type of leader would you be? How would you communicate with other team members? How do you take feedback? Like those are the questions like I want to ask and I want to find out. But as long as you're not like a straight up a-hole, then great. Like I want to have you on the team. I want to work with you. I want to see what you contribute to our product and in our teams. So yeah.
So I have some thoughts on this as well. I think culture fit, certainly, I think most folks would agree now that like what you're going for really is, do they hold similar values? And so if your company has values where one might be no a-holes, right? No one wants to work with a jerk, right? But if you have a small set of values that you're trying to match and make sure that these people also care about those values, that's the important thing, not is this a person I want to get beers with? Is this a person that looks like me and talks like me, right? Like we don't want to build a team that all looks the same and all thinks the same, right? We need diversity. We need diversity of thought to make better products. So it's very important that through your hiring process, you're thinking about those things and saying, okay, this person doesn't have to fit my exact mold, right? We don't need to hire duplicates, right? But do they at their core, you know, believe in solving problems, right? Believe in not being a jerk to other humans, believe in the core things that you believe in. I think that's really how you should try to sort of define cultural fit in that sense and screen for those things.
Nice. All right. Next question. This is a little bit reverse order, but what are your tips for sourcing candidates? And what have you found to be some of the most successful ways to bring in candidates?
I'm really interested to hear what the other panelists say on this one.
Yeah, I have some ideas. So I've spent a lot of time on this. So now I'm fortunate enough to have a team, a talent team, both at Drizzly and then when I was at EasyCater, that source candidates and do a great job at it. But before that, it was really on me as the technology leader to bring people in the door, right? And so like, how do you go about doing that? Well, again, it comes back for me to that mission, right? What is this company trying to achieve? And can I find folks that will get hooked to that mission? So I would spend, you know, a couple hours a day on LinkedIn. I'd build out lists of people that looked interesting. I would email them. I would find real things on their profile that stuck out to me that I could ask them questions about. And it's a lot of work. It's not easy, but really making it personalized, making it about a real problem, a real question that you're dealing with. I got a lot of engineers to respond and to actually get on the phone with me, and we'd chat about like a side project that was on their LinkedIn, right? And that's a phone call, right? But then are they interested now in this company that I'm building, right? And so, I'm always straightforward. I'm not like, oh, I just want to ask you this question. It's like, I'm hiring for this role and I'm really interested in some of the work you've been doing, right? But it is a personalized thing because engineers get so many recruiters and cold emails and cold calls, and it can be overwhelming. But yeah, sourcing is not easy. So anyone who's done that knows it's a lot of hard work. But the more personalized and the more creative you can get will make you stand out. And if you believe in your mission, then you want to find people that are aligned to that too, but you're the best person to sell that.
The way I go about it is a little different because I don't really do cold reach outs, just because Black Tech Pipeline, this is literally like the business model is like recruitment through the talent database that we have. So people sign up to it and that's where I source. But for me, I'm sorry if you can hear my son in the background too. So for me, I am very much focused again on like culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like you want to be happy at a company. Like, I think that's just number one. I think that, outdoes everything. And so when, I'm hiring for a role, I'll reach out to those in my database after going through their resume, looking at their LinkedIn, looking at their GitHub, and I'll reach out and let them know, like, I think they're a great fit. Tell them what the role is, if they're interested in hearing more, and then if they are, I'll give them like a more descriptive overview of the organization itself. Their culture, at least what they've told me so far, their views on DE&I, again, because that's my thing. And if they're interested, I connect them with that employer. So it's a little different for me. But again, like, I just feel like prioritizing just like someone's happiness and just being a good quality organization, like of people, like hiring good people. I just think that that brings people in, that makes people interested, that makes people want to stay,
All right. What are some strategies you've used to create a high-performing engineering team?
I think for us, in terms of making sure our team stays high performing and high impact, I think in terms of like when we hire, like, I think we're very intentional about like when we bring someone on. I think, if we, not growing too fast and just like hiring to kind of get bigger, and, if we have more people, then we can do more things, making sure it's like, we want to do more things, like we just need more people to do that. And so that when people come on board, they're immediately 100% utilized. And I think that's some feedback that we've gotten from our new hires, to be like, I feel like I've done more in the last 2 months than I did the entire last year that I was at my previous company. And I think that is a good indicator for us that, we are bringing people on because we have the work to do versus finding work for them to once they get here. And I think, if you're gauging that level of if you're screening for that level of passion and engagement for like the role in the company and the job, and kind of asking and understanding what someone is interested in doing, and like like, I really want to work on performance optimization, like that's like my thing, like I love doing that. And like when they start, like aim them at performance optimization. I'll let them kind of really focus on what it is that they're interested in, because people that are passionate about what they're working on are going to put in more effort than anyone else. So like that matching of passion and interest and the actual work is a big thing for us.
And so when I kind of think about this, the first thing I like to do is set up a good process, and that's going to look a little different depending on the size of the company, depending on the team. And you never want to have so much process that you slow people down, right? Process is supposed to make us more efficient, it's supposed to make us move faster. But if you find a process that works well for your team, just working in sprints, like different agile methodologies, you can start to gauge where the problem areas might be. And so I think the first step is to get people into a good flow of working. A second step is to maybe add on some data, right? And so with my teams, once the operational piece is there and everyone's working hard, they know what they're supposed to work on, we're getting code out the door, I start to look at some different metrics that can help identify some problems. Let's say a pull request is open for a long time, right? We want to get the average of that down to about 24 hours. And that way we don't have code that's just hanging out there, getting stagnant, maybe can't be used anymore, that kind of thing, right? And if it's not going to production, then maybe we don't need it, right? And so that is like a data point that you can actually look at. And as your team starts to mature, you can like layer in different metrics like that to make sure that we are doing the things that we need to do in order to get value to the customer faster.
What about anything structural about the engineering team? Like, is there a certain team dynamic or team structure that you find works really well?
So for me, I think when you're first, it depends on the phase of the company. I'll say that. So we've tried a few different things over time. At EasyCater, we're using the Spotify squad model, which at some point that will break as well. But really having, 4 or 5 engineers on a team alongside a product manager, a designer, maybe a researcher, working together to solve business problems, right? They have a clearly defined mission. They rally together and they figure out, okay, here's a bunch of things that we need to solve. How are you going to solve that? I think there comes a time when you may split out and have more of like platform back-end centric teams. But I think early on, it's important that, you don't have too many, what's the word? I'm blanking, but basically that you don't need to rely on a bunch of different parties to get your work done, right? Especially in a smaller, chaotic startup environment. You want that team to act as a unit and be able to work on any part of the code that they need to.
Yeah.
I think dependencies is what I was thinking of.
Yeah. Minimize those, yes. Okay. So how do you ensure career growth of team members at every stage of the company? So from the beginning, when maybe there's not much structure, to a larger engineering org, how do you make sure that people are always growing and getting better and on the path they want to be?
So I can jump in on this one. So I think as you think about your team structure, the team can always learn from each other, right? You want to make sure you keep your teams balanced. So if you are hiring people like right out of college, you want to make sure you have some senior engineers that can help support them, right? You don't want that balance to get too far off really in either direction. And so I think if you organize your teams into pods or into squads or groups or whatever, you balance out that team. So someone always has someone to mentor and help them. I think if you're at a very early stage and maybe you don't have a ton of engineers, maybe you don't have that CTO or a person with expertise in an area, look for, an outside advisor, right? Someone who can spend some time with the team and help them level up. I'm going to guess early on, I know we never had true career ladders when first starting, but when you get to a certain size, like I would say somewhere around 20 engineers, the engineers start going, well, how do I move up? How do I grow? I think I'm senior. Why aren't I a senior engineer, right? And so that's when you have to start getting a little bit more structure in place. and really putting together that career ladder and describing at this organization, a senior engineer looks like this. And that takes a lot of thought, and that's not an easy thing to do either. But that's something that you'll want to start providing for your engineers. So it does kind of grow and change over time with the size of your team.
I think also developing a good relationship with your employees as a manager, like, or developing a relationship with your team members as like, you know, lead engineer or manager, or whatever your role is, and making sure you do check-ins with each of them individually. So finding out, you know, are they happy? Where are they unhappy? Where can you help them improve and grow? What are their goals, or what they like to see happen within the organization as a whole, but then also in their role specifically. I think just keeping that line of communication open and accepting transparency and feedback, like that's super important, and that'll allow for a lot of growth for every team member.
Yeah, I think even for kind of a smaller startup like us, I think found it important to still be happy, even if there's, you know, the organization is still pretty flat, so it doesn't look like there's a lot of, you know, opportunity for career growth. Like still having those conversations with everyone on the team, like make sure, you know, one, people know that like it's you know, while it might not be totally obvious what the options are, it is on our minds, and then also when opportunities arise, you know, it's, you know, a much easier and kind of quicker process to be like, oh, like I know this person is, you know, interested in doing that. Like we should, you know, kind of match that interest with, you know, that need for the company. And so, you know, having just, you know, always having those conversations and making sure that, you know, people are, you know, free to kind of say like, hey, I'd really like to work on this, or I'd really like to grow in this area. And so that, you know, that's always kind of a culture of wanting growth and interested in growth, so that when those opportunities arise, you're ready as a team.
Okay. How do you know when it's time to hire more engineers?
Yeah, I mean, kind of mentioned it before. Like, I mean, for us, it's like we know we have things that we need to do, and like we just can't do them without more people. You know, I think like for us it's you know, it's that cut and dry in terms of, you know, it's like you know, because we have a pretty you know, engaged and collaborative team, and like we'd love to, you know, hire more people and like have a bigger team and like, you know, do more things, but making sure that it's, you know, it's at the point where it's like, in order for us to progress as a business, we just need more people to do this work, and like, okay, it's time to hire. And, you know, identifying what that work is and how many people we need.
Yeah, I would say it always feels like it's time to hire, right? We should have hired more yesterday, no matter what stage you're at. I was actually just talking to someone from Wayfair, and they're like, yes, we're 12,000 people, but honestly, we have projects where we're like, we don't have the resources to do this, you know? So I think we all feel it at every level. But, you know, like Matt was saying, like, it's really about like balancing, okay, do we have a budget? Do we have a clear roadmap? Is this going to accelerate our business, right? And so these are things that you have to think about and really understand. That's the last thing you want to do is grow too quickly and then have to let some people go. So you really have to understand what the work that you're allocating towards another team is going to bring to the business, and sort of make those decisions alongside probably your either business or technical partners. But
yeah, then there's the more obvious ones when you keep pinging people in Slack and Basecamp and asking why something hasn't gotten done yet. And they're like, I can't do it yet. Like, I'm still working on this. Like, there's those very obvious things where it's like, okay, we definitely need more hands, you know?
Nice. Okay. What are some of the mistakes or biggest learnings that you've had building out an engineering team?
I can say I've never built out an engineering team myself, but as someone who came in as a junior a few times, I think maybe hiring someone when you weren't ready for them, if that makes sense. Not having the bandwidth to like really get them onboarded, to really get them settled, and having them understand like, you know, this is the code base, this is the project we're working on, and really introducing them to like what's going on. Because then you're setting them up for failure really. So just having the bandwidth to like really get them settled is really important, and making sure you're there to answer their questions, and that you can hold their hands for just a little bit, you know. Yeah, that's my answer.
That's a good answer. That's definitely a very good answer. And I think when you're talking about early stage companies especially, but really I think any stage company, like sometimes we make mistakes when we hire. Sometimes we hire people that don't, you know, have the same values as our company has. And sometimes you meet someone for a few hours, you decide to hire them, and sometimes it's just not a good fit when they're in the door. So I think something that you should do is also not be afraid to have those tough conversations early and often. So whether this is a fixing behavioral thing, or helping to level up and get some more training on the technical side, or if it's just not going to work and you've given it that shot and you've given it a fair shot, you just got to let people go, you know. And it's like, it's not fair to them if they're in a role that doesn't make sense, that they can't excel at. And it's not fair to the company either to keep holding on to this person. So, I mean, I believe in giving people a fair chance and to work with them and to give feedback and to help. But, you know, sometimes it's just not the right hire. And so you can't be afraid to correct that.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, thank you. So we have about 20 minutes left, and we have some questions from the audience. So I think we can start going through a couple of those. So I'll start with this top one. As a non-technical founder building an engineering team, how do you test for technical knowledge? It's a good one.
Just to repeat, that was, as a non-technical founder, how do you test for technical knowledge?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like, so I was gonna say, that's really hard. I'd say like visuals, like show me what you've built, you know, tell me about that process. How long were you on this project? You know, what was it like working for, I don't know if it was a contractor, this employer, whatever it is, like kind of just asking those questions. Why did you use the tools to build this specific product this way? I mean, like getting really specific with your questions so that you can have some sort of understanding of how they apply all of this experience and knowledge to your product. But that is really, that is a little difficult when you're not technical yourself. Yeah. But I think visuals, like questions that paint visuals are the best way to find out.
So I'm gonna go ahead and say again, enlist help. You know, find that technical advisor. I know I used to interview people. I was a part of the Techstars community, or I still am, I guess, but I went through Techstars a couple of times. And there were founders there that were trying to hire technical people, and they didn't know how to ask them technical questions. So I used to interview folks sometimes and kind of help them make those decisions. There are also, you know, third-party companies out there that even if you're at a bigger company, you can sort of give them your hiring pipeline, and they will do that initial screen for you. So I think, you know, early on, those technical hires are very important and key to building out your company. So it's important to try and get some type of technical screen from someone who can perform those screens. Otherwise, you know, it's a little bit, you're taking a leap of faith there, but maybe if they have good enough, you know, recommendations and you feel comfortable, then it's okay.
Yeah, I'm also going to shamelessly plug G2I because this is what we do. So G2Y, we pre-vet engineers so that our clients don't have to spend the time and money doing it themselves, especially like non-technical founders. So everyone who works at G2Y, we are engineers. And so we vet them, we give them a code challenge, we give them a technical interview, we score them, and we show that to our clients so that they can see like, okay, they got a good score. These are the notes that they wrote down. They're not like super technical, so you can't understand it as a non-technical person, but it's enough to be like, okay, like this person could probably do the job. And they start off as contractors too. They're not just full-time employees yet. So I think like maybe using resources like that, that's really helpful because they're doing the job for you.
Yeah, I would say if you're a non-technical co-founder looking for a technical partner, you're like your first technical hire, like I would imagine that means you're pretty like really early stage still, and it might just be you and them. And so I would probably say that the technical piece is probably the least important part of that process in terms of hiring that person. It might be, I think worrying about finding like the perfect technical talent to, for your product, it might be, a tough challenge where if you focus on like, I need someone that can figure it out, but like, I need to be able to work really well with them. And so focusing on like, how do they explain the tech to me, like, can we have a conversation? Can I ask completely oblivious questions to them and they like kind of, walk me through it and then in like and it feels good kind of on both sides. And so that would be another way to think about it.
Yeah, like explain it to me like I'm 7. Do that.
But actually, that's very important. Okay, here's a good one. How do I turn my doers into leaders?
Ask them if they want to be.
Oh my gosh, I was just gonna say that. First, ask if they want to be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a super good point. A lot of people kind of get forced into leadership or management, and that doesn't usually make really great managers, right? And so a lot of times too, people are just excelling at the technical piece, and people's like, great, you're a manager now, but they're missing the people side. So I think if someone's interested in taking on more of a leadership role, and sort of like force multiplying through a team, that's something that you need to figure out how to give small projects to them where they can kind of get a taste of what it means to be in that leadership role. And this is something actually with anyone that's growing, right, is you want to give stretch projects where it's safe to fail, right? And you're that safety net. So if they are going to fail miserably, you can let them work that out, figure it out, and kind of be that safety net to say, all right, like let's course correct, right? And you should be able to identify what areas that they can have more freedom to fail in. But I would say like finding small ways for them to start taking on more leadership, seeing how they do, and coaching them through it.
I would add to that in terms of defining for yourself like what you mean by leadership, right? Because I think a lot of the times like leadership is directly associated with management and kind of the like managing of others as a form of leadership, and that doesn't have to be the case. If someone is really interested in being an individual contributor for the rest of their career because they just really like the technology, then like there are ways for them to be a leader within the company and kind of showcase and kind of be a role model for how to be a really high performing member of the team. And there might be other ways for them to kind of step up and show expertise and kind of show leadership in different areas, and it doesn't have to be in kind of a direct manager report relationship.
Yeah, there's a second half to the question, which is, what if the appointed leaders are too unsure of themselves? So how do you build that confidence? How do you let them know that they have the permission to make decisions on behalf of the company?
Yeah, I think again, sort of like those smaller projects, right? Like that might help boost some confidence. So it sounds like it's a confidence thing. And I think figuring out the human and the person and what will work for them. Maybe it's they come up with the plan and have sort of the direction that they want to go in, and they sort of run it by whoever the first few times, right? And when they start getting you're right on track, go for it, they might feel a little bit better to continue that without the hand-holding. But it sounds like it's just a confidence thing. So getting some early small wins can really help there.
Right. And I think like change is always scary for anything, but especially when you're going into a leadership role where you're going to be overseeing other people. But if that's something that you wanted, like I think accepting like you're not going to do everything perfectly. It's one of those things like it's almost like a you problem, but it's not actually a problem. It's like it's something you have to experience it and make your mistakes and you'll learn from them. But I don't know, like Nike says, like just do it, and do it to the best of your ability. And again, be open to feedback, be open to transparency. And again, that's going to help you grow as a leader.
Yeah. And the one point that I would add as a kind of different way of thinking about it is, when you have those conversations with them and kind of understanding where the, lack of confidence or hesitation is coming from is something that we've, I've reflected on with my team and that we've worked through a little bit is, sometimes people just are a little bit paralyzed by inaction because, it's just not clear that it's okay for them to go and do that without, the right kind of approver or the right process, or they don't want to be stepping on somebody else's toes because they think it's somebody else's responsibility. And so I think sometimes a lot of that can be handled by just, as Lauren in the comments just said, open communication, and just so a lot of it comes down to, I think, probably just having more conversations and making sure that, we really understand the kind of root cause and the kind of disconnect. Because a lot of times it is just a communication thing, you got to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we have actually 2 questions about this. So specifically for early stage startups, any thoughts from the panel on compensation via equity? So how do you think about equity for employees?
Yes. So I think that especially at an early stage, everyone's getting equity, right? I mean, for a long time, everyone's getting equity at this company as a matter of like how much and sort of their role. And there's no exact science to that. You can do some research, again, like, find some advisors, whether it's official or unofficial. And you have to kind of figure out what works for your cap table and what kind of makes sense depending on the role. But I will say most engineers you're not going to get for just equity. I wasn't sure if there was like a just equity in there. So I don't really know any engineers that I feel like sometimes on the side, maybe someone will kind of do that, right? As like, this is a fun project for me, so we'll just have some equity. But I think you need to be prepared to pay a pretty good salary. I think probably going to a very early stage company, engineers are more likely to accept a lower salary than they would at a larger company. But yeah, engineers will want both, so.
Yeah, in terms of like the decision around how much equity, there are, I think, some examples out there in terms of like, we found one that's just like a flat calculation. And so like, it kind of takes all like judgment out of it in terms of it's a factor of years of the company and salary. And so there's kind of no, it's super clear what you're going to get based on your salary. Salary tables are all open, so it's super clear what your salary is going to be, like what any promotions are going to be, and just making that all open also makes it kind of easier to have that conversation. So it's, when you're giving those offers, it's like, hey, like this is your equity and this is how it's determined. And then, it kind of eliminates any questions around like kind of where that number came from and kind of what are our mentality around equity and raises and all that. So
yeah, I like what Lauren just said to prove yourself and review in 6 months. Maybe something like that. I had been at a startup for, they said after a year I'd get equity, and before a year everyone was laid off. So, I was looking forward to something that didn't happen. So like also thinking about those timeframes, because again, you're a startup. So you just never kind of know what's gonna happen, but people are gonna be thinking about that and keeping that in mind when they're reviewing an offer from you. So yeah, that's a conversation to have with your co-founders in terms of time.
I think a pretty
Hey.
I was gonna say, I think a pretty standard time is, that 1 year quarter cliff with vesting for the additional 3 years after, usually on like a monthly basis. So, but you should have been vesting for that year, even if you didn't actually get the equity until the end of the year. So I don't know what that looked like, but that is a risk that you take joining a startup. And so these engineers, like they're going to want a salary, and you're going to want to pay them because you want good people to come and work and help build out the product. Yeah.
Hey, these questions have all been great, everyone. I think, Carolina, we have time for maybe one more short question because we have about 5 minutes left. So if you want to pick one from there, I think we'll wrap up after that. Thank you all for the questions.
All right, so the last question, tricky one. How do you strategize when you can't hire more? That is, cannot hire more, but still need to get things done. How do you advise structuring and keeping morale up?
So my thoughts on this is you need to be very targeted and very focused. So you need to work with whoever's owning the product, whether sometimes that's a CEO, sometimes it's a product person, but whoever's owning that product needs to be very, very clear about priorities. And then you really have to focus the teams. You can't have people working on multiple things at once. You need to focus, get something done, move on to the next. And recognize when the team's working hard, recognize when they're doing a really great job, reward them in different ways, and you can kind of get creative in your own organization. But if it's a matter of like getting more done, a lot of times people think about splitting up teams into smaller amounts, so smaller amounts of engineers, and having them work on more things. But actually, that just means you have 3, 4, 5 projects moving along slowly instead of like getting something across the finish line. So that would be my advice if you're constrained to a certain number of engineers, is focus the right amount on the problem and just try and get it done. You can also cut scope.